Today we're talking about the infiltration of Islam by colonizers. Welcome back, everyone. Britain has been obsessed with Muslims since forever. You really need to know that they've been obsessed with Muslims, okay? I'm going to tell you exactly how we know that. The Brits believed that Muslims were very dangerous to the occupation and the colonizer, which was the British power in India. They noticed that Muslims don't accept colonizers, and they had an inclination, you could say, they had a whim, you could say, that it had to do with Islam, and that the reason why Muslims are not being dominated, colonizers cannot dominate Muslims because of their religion. That's the whim they got, okay? And so in 1871, the British government actually ordered a research, and it was to study whether the Muslims' religion was withholding them from being subjects to their master, the colonizer. And so this is called the Report of Hunter, and it was called Indian Muslims, Re-Examination of its Background. And so according to the book about this author, Sir William Hunter, he actually admits that the true purpose of the book was to find out whether Muslims were bound by their religion to rebel against the Queen. They were like, it seems like these Muslims, they don't want to become our loyal subjects. What could it be? That's what they were wondering. What could it be? And then they had a whim. They were like, maybe it is their Islam. Maybe it is the fact that they are strong Muslims. Okay, well, guess what they found out? That it was indeed Islam, which made it impossible for Muslims to be like, yes, my master. And so in this book, they said that, the Quran is based upon the conception that Muslims don't get conquered. They are the ones conquering others. MashaAllah. And that's also the reason why they realized, they could never colonize in peace. And this book is still available. You can order it. It's being published by Cambridge Press. And I just want you to know something important, because there's been a report published online. I'll also make sure to show it. And they say that this guy, Hunter, who made this report, he is the reason why we had separatism in India. They said, Hunter has been regarded as the inventor of Muslim separatism and has been linked with a deliberate official policy of divide and rule. So you can understand, we're looking back now. Now all these researchers are saying Hunter is the guy who got the order to find out how can we divide and rule these Muslims. Muslims in India, making sure they don't want to have anything to do with their peers there, but also later on the Muslims in Pakistan who might not want to have anything to do with Indian Muslims and vice versa. And so I just want all Muslims in India and Pakistan to realize this. When you are rebelling against your fellow Muslims, you're first of all disregarding, the command of Allah that we are supposed to behave as a brotherhood. But next to that, you are actually subjecting yourself to the rule of the colonizer who literally wants to divide and rule us. Think about that. Think about that. All of you Muslims who ever talk badly about other Muslims, and most of it is based on propaganda created by non-Muslims. Let me just tell you that you are literally obeying your colonizer, your master, in doing that. Okay. So, the core of all this misery in the Muslim world, it is these type of theories which have been founded by colonizers who were looking for ways to dominate Muslims. I just want you to know that. Okay, but it didn't just stop there. I want to make you aware of something else. Okay, so I already told you, like, Brits are thirsty over Muslims, okay? Dominating Muslims is like their dream in life, okay? And it's been like that for centuries. Like, it's not now that we see this happening. This has been happening since forever. Like, I can go back to like 1400 years ago and tell you about examples. But right now, I'm just going to focus on a century and a half ago. And so the Brits studied how they could defeat Islam and dominate Muslims. In 1869, the Brits sent a private commission to India to research the cause of resistance of the Muslims. And they called this cause of resistance, they called it mutiny. I didn't know that. It's such a funny word, mutiny. And they concluded in 1870 that the only way, listen to this, the only way they could infiltrate Islam is if they could invent a new person who would declare himself a prophet. Can you imagine? Okay, they would invent a prophet who would be loyal to the colonizer, and that's how they could infiltrate Islam, make sure that Muslims are loyal to this prophet, and this prophet is carrying out the agenda of the colonizer. This fake prophet would flourish under the patronage of the British government. And so this is why I just want you all to be very aware. When these movements come, when these people come who try to spread a form of Islam that has nothing to do with Islam, or which includes a few falsehoods, let's just say it like that. These things aren't a coincidence, okay? And it's not just like you have to wait for someone to say like, oh, I'm a messiah, I'm a prophet, for you to be like, okay, this is probably a lie. Like, they do it in very direct ways with like literally these type of like false prophets, but also indirect ways, which are like trends of behavior, trends on spirituality, trends in education, trends in like anything, music, that are very harmful. And that's how they try to infiltrate. I mean, that's just something that we can see here, like this is very deliberately done. Then I want to tell you about some of the fake prophets that Islam has seen. So in 1870, they concluded they needed fake prophets to make sure that they could infiltrate Islam and make Muslims loyal to the fake prophet. And this fake prophets would be loyal to the colonizer. And so who did they invent all of a sudden? Well, one of them is this guy, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who is the leader of the Ahmadiyya clan, I would say. He has two streams within his organization or sect, which is the Qadianis and the Ahmadiyya. And so the Ahmadiyya, they say he was a reformer. So like he just like preached a better form of Islam, while the Qadianis believe he's really like a prophet, which is astaghfirullah, it's not allowed. What's interesting though is that in the Muslim World League of 1974, this man and this sect was just completely rejected by the Muslim world, mashallah. And the sect was declared non-Muslim at this time. And I do think it's really weird, but this also makes me almost feel like they have Jewish relations, is that almost every leader at the Muslim World League who helped declare these people non-Muslim ended up, except for the Iranian leader at the time, I think he was exiled, but like everybody else, which was the king in Saudi, it was Gaddafi, it was Saddam, just many of these leaders, they just didn't make it, okay? And so at the time, they were also discussing Palestine, but at the time, they were also discussing Ahmadiyya. And so it just feels like all these topics are like so closely related, right? Where there's problems, you see there's Israel, and where there's Israel, there's the Ahmadiyyas, and coincidentally in Kashmir, there's the Ahmadiyyas, but also the Israelis, and the Jewish are making a claim. It's it's a bit suspicious, okay? But then there's another place where there was a false messiah, and that was in Sudan, what I understand. I read this book by a guy who said there's links between the Brits and the Jews, and his name, I think, was Ahmad Bashir. He wrote this book about it, and he mentioned that there was also a Sudanese false messiah. His name was Ahmad bin Abdullah, I think. And in 1881, he proclaimed himself as the Messiah in Islam. And a year later, the Brits entered Sudan. But I think they were there already a longer time. But basically, it's no coincidence that these false messiahs pop up somewhere where there's also colonizers waiting to hit. Okay, and so you have to know one thing about Ahmadiyya. I researched it by reading their own website, because they have many websites in which they give information about their movement, and they're propagating a watered down version of Islam. And I can understand that if you see Islam as a threat to the British rule or the colonizer, you would want the Muslims to be less Muslim, right? That would solve the issue. And so they propagate, for example, that during Ramadan, you don't have to follow the times of fasting. You can just fast shorter times, but they also propagate that you don't have to pray on time. And I think that's a little bit problematic. And I just want you to know that whenever you actually accept a watered down version of Islam because that's what you want, or your celebrity idols tell you to do that, or, you're just being primed by the environment to become a lesser Muslim, you are actually subjugating to your master, the colonizer. And that's why, being a bad Muslim is every colonizer's dream. I just want you to know that. This is literally being studied by them, strategized by them, and then you actually do it. Crazy. Other religions are being infiltrated as well. I just want to make clear that it's not just about Islam. I do think that Islam is the only one who's hard to infiltrate, because Christianity, for example, has been infiltrated. And I think it's been infiltrated in a more successful way because there is a lot of Christians who believe they should be loyal to Zionism, right? And so this has been researched. I read an article on the Middle Eastern, the Washington Report on Middle Eastern Affairs, and they reported that there's been a certain Bible that's been corrupted, which is widely in use. And this is called the Schofield Reference Bible, and it contains the text of the King James Authorized Version. But the author, who is Cyrus Schofield, actually implemented some things that are not originally Christian. That's what I understand. And he has all these things that imply that you should be loyal to Zionism. So he has these sentences which I found on this website. He said, "For a nation to commit the sin of anti-Semitism brings inevitable judgment." That's what these Christians who follow this Bible believe. "Then the man or nation that lifts a voice or hands against Israel invites the wrath of God. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them who curse thee." So if you bless Israel, you're going to be blessed. If you curse Israel, you're going to be cursed. That's literally what they told the Christians. It's not right. Okay, there's this guy, the most famous guy who talks about this is, I think his name is Ian Carroll. And Ian Carroll, he's a famous YouTuber. I've seen him talk about it. He actually includes the Rothschilds in this, because he says it was funded, the Bible was funded by the Rothschilds. I think his explanation is that it was published by Oxford Books or Oxford Press, and that the Rothschilds own that. That was his reasoning for it. And I've read articles by journalists. I think it was on the same website, the Washington Report on Middle Eastern Affairs, where they said that the Schofield Bible actually influenced Christian Zionism, and this in turn influenced Christian governments and presidents like Truman, Johnson, Reagan, and George W. Bush. And if they had not been influenced by this, they might have not caused all these wars in the Middle East. So that's actually pretty disturbing.